Hey, everyone. Andy, Allan,
Hey,
welcome, gents.
Howdy.
Well, this was a great idea, Andy.
you know something? I figured y'all were missing out on being at RSA because it's such an amazing experience that you would want to join in.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Well, this is about as much as you would want to join in.
I think we're far enough here, right? Like, Allan, are you feel FOMO not being at RSA?
I'm feeling the FOMO. Big time I'm feeling the FOMO. I was dead set on going to RSA, and then the orthopedic surgeon explained to me I'd still be on crutches and not at RSA. I would much rather be at RSA than
That's true. And Allan was supposed to do an escape room with me on Sunday, and so
Yes.
we really missed Allan.
Okay, so I had no plans to go to RSA. Zero. Zilch, nada. Zero plans to go to RSA. I was just like, I'm going to skip RSA this year. So, Andy, are we missing anything outside of the escape room? Which I may have showed up just for an escape room with you and Allan.
Yep. So, yeah, I do think you're missing a little bit, but you're not missing like substantially like, oh my God, this is very different. Like as usual, RSA is like 7 different conferences. There's the people who are attending the actual sessions. I actually did 2 sessions on RSA, one at B-Sides. I've been doing some book signings. There's the vendor show floor, a lot of AI. Basically, like almost every booth has the word AI, whether it's AI enabled, securing AI augmented, whatever it is. That's obviously the big buzzword this year. Lots of parties as usual. They're actually, some of them are more crowded, some are less crowded. I did not win an award for the SC magazine. I was kind of optimistic for that. Some cool buzz about a couple of vendors, but Mark Van Zadelhoff at Mimecast won Security Executive of the Year. Although he did say that he thinks I should have won it. So, I'll take that for what it's worth.
There you go. The gracious winner.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll be honest. If I had won, I'd have been like, ha, I won. I'm better than y'all.
Right? Slam the award on the ground and, mic drop.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm wishing I was at RSA. I'm truly wishing I was there. I had plans, I had schedules, I had meetings, I had lunches, I had the whole week booked out. I had dinners, I had a house I was staying at. In fact, the Airbnb that everybody's staying at is still on my credit card and under my name. We had to go with the host and say, we're adding everyone else, talk to them. I won't be there. It's it was a mess. I really wanted to be there.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. So I think there were some neat things though at RSA. I'll say the CISO boot camp. Very cool what they're doing, giving the people who aren't yet CISOs the education in how to become a CISO. Helen Patton and I did a talk there. It was fantastic. Some great participants.
How many people were at that boot camp that weren't CISOs?
Almost everybody at the boot camp were not CISOs.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yeah. And so the kickoff, I went to their kickoff on Sunday. I felt like it was probably 100, 150 people in the room. And then they had like a full day Sunday, and then they had like drop-in events, and we did a Tuesday event. It was less attended, maybe 30 people came in to do the I thought it was really funnily named a unicorn designed by committee, the idealized CISO, where Helen and I talked about our career journeys and sort of how you pick up all the right skills in a world where CISOs or people who want to become CISOs no longer have like this open field of there's nobody else doing security, so you have to do it all. Which is how like the prior generation of CISOs all got their jobs.
There were the people who raised their arms and said, sure, I'll try this. And became
a little bit of that. And you were the one technical person who wasn't a jerk. James is like, well, sure? Okay, wasn't as much of a jerk as the rest of them.
Peter says, hey, party people. So, hey, Peter.
Hey, Peter.
Hey, Peter. Look, you will get a shout out if you talk to us on any channel.
You do. You will absolutely get a shout out. So Andy, let me ask you this question. You said you've given a few talks and you've signed your book, 1% Leadership, which if you haven't gotten Andy's book, you should go to Amazon now and get it.
Or you could come to the show floor if for some reason you're at RSA. I'll be doing a book signing at 2:00
If you're at RSA and watching us right now, then I wonder your time management skills at RSA.
They might be amazing, and they want the summary of what they're currently missing, but I kind of doubt it.
So you gave a few talks. Some of the highlights from your talks. What did Allan and I miss from your specific presentations?
Yep. So first thing I did was B-sides. We did the CISO series podcast. So you can just go listen to the podcast or read the transcript. That one was actually really good because we had a really good what's worse on there. I don't want to spoil it for you, but we had some interest. The audience did not agree with the two, with me and the guest. So I got the guest to agree with me. It was Alexandra Rediger at RTX.
Nice.
Fantastic guest. She's amazing. So did that. Then Monday morning, I kicked off RSA with Zero Trust Left to Give, where we went wrong. I know a lot of people are tired of hearing about zero trust. In a sense, I am too, because y'all are getting it wrong. Like everybody is so focused on like, how do we stop trusting the user and how do we over monitor their device to make sure it's not compromised? That like every ransomware breach involves our monitoring tools getting compromised and people moving laterally. Right? We should have built monitoring and defensive tools that sort of kicked the endpoint out of the enterprise as much as possible and said, look, lightweight, no agents or very minimal agents, but stop trying to over monitor the user. And let's actually focus our energy on protecting the interaction with that endpoint and letting it not trust anything else. And so we can focus on the places that basically got ignored, which is the SaaS ecosystem, the non-human identity ecosystem, as all the places that we should be focused on when we think about how to solve the zero trust conundrum. Because still, it's too much focused on the end user.
Well, now you have zero trust for Gen AI. Has that anyone said that yet at RSA?
So I've heard zero trust for AI. And I've heard AI-enabled zero trust. I've definitely heard both of those. But I think they're just like throwing buzzwords at the wall to sort of see what's out there.
My favorite RSA was probably 2 or 3 ago. I was in the showroom floor there, and I walked to the startup alley where just everybody's got the little bitty booth. And I have a single photograph. I was able to sort of stretch back with the camera and take this one photograph. On the left, it said quantum computing. And on the right, it said post-quantum computing, right across the hallway from each other. And I was hoping to get a similar shot about, securing AI security, one shot.
Security.
But I'm not there.
Yeah, I think the zero trust for Gen AI just hasn't really caught on as a buzzword, because instead people are saying agentic security, which functionally is sort of the same thing. Like, how do we broker our agents so that they can only do the things they're supposed to do and not a bunch of other stuff?
There it is.
Well, there's that. Peter's got a question for you, Andy, since you're the one there. Is anyone getting anything right? Is there any good news from this year's RSA thus far? I mean, it's only Wednesday. The show technically wraps up tomorrow.
Technically, but I'll be on a plane tomorrow morning. So I think the answer is yes. There are some companies who are getting things right. And look, I think we're all being naysayers because it's fun, it's easy, but at the end of it, there's a ton of progress going on. I don't want to diminish the good work that a lot of the vendors are doing for us, that a lot of companies are doing in securing their environments. I'm seeing more practitioners engaging. I think one of the neatest companies I saw, and I'll be honest, they're in my portfolio, so I'm sort of shilling my own company, but I want to just disclose that, was Minimus, who came out of stealth on Monday. Like, nice. Huge high-risk marketing thing to come out of stealth at RSA and see if you can sort of beat the noise. I think that they really did, because I got a few reporters asking me questions about them unprompted. And Minimus basically said, look, the whole AI problem, like everybody keeps saying, oh, we'll use AI to replace your humans, or to augment your humans, but we really mean replace, is they're not tackling the real problem, which is there is too much work to do because we're doing security too late. And rather than trying to prioritize, like, oh, here's all the vulnerabilities that you don't know really what to do with them, why don't you have minimal software images? And so Minimus basically came out of stealth with, like, here's a containerized set of packages. So you can basically get the Minimus Nginx release. And it is the latest version of Nginx, stripped down to only what Nginx really needs. Like, you strip out the developer tools, strip out all the like fancy configuration utilities that don't need to be there.
The attack
and then
surface.
rebuild, so reduce the attack surface, and then rebuild the entire SBOM from latest. Because the challenge is, like, if you've got a top level package that includes 4 packages, like, those are often specified by number. And those numbers are now specifying packages below them also by the release, and that cascades down, but there's latency in every one of those SBOMs. And so you end up inheriting something like 12 down that's 6 months old, not for any good reason, just because that happens to be what was in the build tree. And so rebuilding everything so you get latest of only the minimal things you need. And it basically like strips out 95% of the attack surface. And so we often talk about attack surface reduction. And when we say it, what we really mean is like put a defense in front of the attack surface and hide it.
Right.
And this actually says, just get rid of it.
Right.
Like, I love this approach. I think ChainGuard is looking at something a little bit similar, but it's a little more heavyweight. So there's a couple companies in that space, but I really like how Minimus approached it. And their buzz was they're giving away a Mini Cooper as a way to get people engaged, like Mini Cooper, Minimus. I think that's kind of a cute thing.
Yep. Well, and if you do that for the software and you also do that for the firmware layer, then now you're dealing with F-bombs.
Right. Yeah, but I'm not a big fan of S-bombs in general, so I tend to drop them. But you can drop all the F-bombs you want.
So we got another question from the audience here. This is a LinkedIn user who remains anonymous. The question's for you, Andy. I'm curious to hear your take on how many vendors were legitimately claiming to use or solve AI problems, and how many were just using the buzzwords.
So I'm going to say that it's probably, of everybody who says AI, what they really mean. So I'm going to put this in, you're probably just using the buzzwords, is somewhere in your dev pipeline, you have AI, right? And I'll use, one of the companies I was talking to is in our portfolio, so I get them to disclose. And they're like, yeah, like here's how we use AI. Like we're doing some of this work in parallel with AI and humans, but the AI just sort of does a first pass, says, hey, here's what's going on. There's a human next to it who's reading the output. And so it's almost like having an intern that happens to be a robot, but an intern that like reacts really quickly. So they're actually like super helpful to you, but you're not trying to train them much on anything other than sort of the prompt injection or prompt engineering. Mm-hmm. So a lot of companies, I think, say AI enabled when that's really what they mean is, sure, we use some AI, some ChatGPT in our pipeline. What I look for when somebody talks about AI, if I'm trying to challenge them, I sort of ask them to see if where they're using AI, because to me there's three categories. There's the analytic and reductive AI. So think about neural networks, machine learning, even just like linear regression. Like how do you take large data sets and come to opinions about them? There's automation, which is what people want out of AI, but let's be honest, Gen AI is not good at automation. And then there's generation, which is what Gen AI is fantastic at. And there's a lot of companies using Gen AI for generation and automation, and that's going to be kind of dangerous because the challenge of Gen AI is you give it a prompt and it doesn't do the same thing every single time. Mm-hmm. And so if you're using
meant
Gen
by
AI,
design to spin infinity until it gets it right. Yeah.
Right. But if I'm an ops team and I have an alert, I kind of want to do the same thing every time that alert shows up. So maybe I want Gen AI to help me create my process. But if somebody doesn't talk about that and say, oh, like everything we're doing is about automation and Gen AI is just helping us do automation faster, that's when I know they're not talking buzzwords. If they're like, oh, I've got an LLM agent that is doing this, I get kind of nervous, honestly, because I don't think that it's buzzwords. I actually worry that it's just dangerous use of the wrong technology.
It was, we can go back 5 years to when people were saying AI when it was machine learning.
Right.
Or
even further back when it was just neural networks, right?
Right.
Yes. And now it's just, it's an LLM. Like and these LLMs are fantastic at very specific jobs if you know how to, correctly manage them.
If you go beyond the hype and you give a practitioner the real method by which you're evolving and you're becoming a partner to a security program, you're likely going to get more fans than a potential big buzzword on your booth at RSA. Now, I get it. Marketing people have a very tough job. They're trying to create some buzz around it, but I think there's a requirement of balance, right? Kind of the balance between the buzzword to the actual.
The places where I see AI being used a lot, and you can decide if you think this is just buzzword use or not, is almost being as a buddy. To say, okay, we have an alert, we fired an alert, we know we need to do X, but we need some human to go do X. And so we have an agent that is trying to tell the human how to go do X. And so it's okay if it's a little bit different every time, so it doesn't sound like a robot. And so a lot of when you see people saying, oh, the agentic SOC, I think that's where a lot of them are headed towards is, look, we know we still can't use automation to fix problems because y'all don't trust the security tools. But we need somebody to work with engineers, and an agent can actually do that pretty well. And so I see a bunch of companies doing that, and I don't think that's buzzwords. I think that's real. I think it highlights the real problem, which is we have a lot of problems and nobody trusts us to fix them.
It's a 10-year-old vision, really, because if you look back at when UEBA first started getting integrated into SIMs, somebody had the very clever idea of we could actually drive proactive controls off this same UEBA. In other words, spot the problem, address the problem. And they were trying that way back before we had LLMs or agentic anything. They were just doing it with old school, UEBAs technically, I guess, were really, pattern recognition and, behavioristic monitoring. Like it wasn't anything like we have today. And they were already trying to do it back then and it wasn't working. You couldn't trust it to flip the right switch.
Right. And a big part of the challenge, and this comes back to my zero trust talk, is we don't trust the users. And I think as security professionals and as vendor practitioners, we need to get into a world where we actually say, like, any security flow in which you say the user is the weakest link means you're not looking at it correctly. What it actually means is the user is the strongest link because the rest of the links are awful.
Right.
Like if a user is clicking on stuff, the problem is not the user clicking, it's that the mail system delivered the link and the browser system is not safe against the click. Those are the real weak links. Like that's where I think we need to get to is like trust the user more. And that's where I do like the agentic SOC model. It says, hey, we know we need to manipulate the user into doing something. So we kind of are trusting them.
I'm going to get a t-shirt made that says agentic human.
Principles of least software.
Yeah, I love the principle of least software. Peter, we're going to run with that. I'm going to go tell that one to Minimus and be like, hey, you should run with that one. So polls, I don't know if that's read backwards, it's slop. We could have some entertaining things with that. So if we read it in French, it would be slop in some fashion.
Nice.
Yep. And then actually one thing I am proud of, to shift off of agentic real quick. So I launched howtociso.com.
Nice.
So I'm putting in there content for people who are either current CISOs that just want refreshers or new CISOs. Like you can find there the job description for like everything a CISO might be asked to do. So you can sort of look at that and say, where do I need to grow? It's got the zero trust papers I wrote. So here's the environments you need to think about protecting, what zero trust principles are, sort of how to apply them, the first 91-day guide for CISOs. And then a bunch of op-eds that I have written that I think are very relevant for the CISO. So it's all curated content. Everything is written by me. No AI, because I think people want my voice. I don't have any guest writers. There's no, like I've had a bunch of people already reach out and be like, hey, can I write for your thing? And I'm like, go write somewhere. The reason I did this is so many people are writing for LinkedIn for the clicks or for Twitter or for wherever, and then this content gets lost. And I wanted one place to curate, like, here's what you need if you want to be a CISO. And it's not done. It's going to keep going. I got like a bunch of more in works that'll come out over the rest of the year and then obviously into next year.
I love it.
So howtociso.com, that's on the ticker here below on the screen for everyone to see.
Oh, awesome. And there's a Discord if you can find it, like buried. It's currently linked in from one of the talks I did, but I'm going to promote that up to the main page soon.
Okay, so there's a Discord. Unbelievable.
Yep.
Oh, Peter's going to send us an invoice for the principle of least software tag. So now that you're using his trademark term, he's going to send us an invoice.
He needs to send it not to us, but to Minimus, right? Yeah. And maybe if no one wins the Mini Cooper, they can send it to Peter.
They can send it. Yeah, maybe Peter, if they decide to use it, I'll get them to at least send you a remote controlled Mini Cooper.
Ooh, that's a great idea. Or like a replica of one that he can put on his desk with maybe a Minimus logo on it. Man, I'm in the wrong.
Ooh.
I need to go do marketing for a little bit.
You write this in the style of Andy Ellis. You don't want to go there. You don't want to go there with your writing. Trust me on this one.
Yeah. So I actually did. I uploaded my book I built a little chat GPT, one of the bespoke LLMs, and I trained it on my book. And I said, hey, I need some leadership coaching in this style. It is the funniest thing I've ever read. Because it's like the uncanny valley of my style. It's like almost my style, but I can tell I didn't quite write it.
All right. So Peter's got another good question that he asked a little while ago. What's the sentiment on the economy at RSA?
So I think there's a lot of people who are pretty nervous. A lot of enterprise, customers and clients and a lot of different companies have started slowly pulling back or even stopping projects. So there's a lot of hesitancy right now. You see that in a lot of places. So when you do see, investments happening, They are like, this is not like 2-3 years ago when like there was like a complete void for a while of no investments were going on. They're still happening. We obviously just launched Minimus. We've announced a couple of extensions, and we've got a couple things coming out of stealth from the seed. But I do know it's been a buzz. Like every founder is worried about this. If they've built their business on the enterprise, they're more worried about it. If they've built it on the small to mid market, I think that they are a little bit less concerned, because those are folks who only buy when they're desperate and they need something, and they're slightly less likely to react on anticipation of a problem. Like, it's not that you've got your customers went out of business. You just have big enterprises saying, hey, let's not buy anything right now. If it just takes us another 3 months, it's not the end of the world. It's not systemic. It's not everywhere. But certainly that sort of sentiment is there.
Awesome. So go ahead,
I was
Allan.
going to ask, like,
shoot.
The big question for me is the guy who's not there, right? RSA to me is kind of a microcosm, if you will, of the greater cybersecurity ecosystem. It's a moment in time, condensed bubble that may or may not be reflective of everything we're seeing out here, right? So the question about the economy, I thought, was a brilliant question. Is that something everybody's worried about in the big picture? What's it like at RSA? AI, what do we see as the real trends outside of our RSA? In the real world, what are the real trends, and how aligned is RSA with those trends? Is it a barometer? Is it a predictive algorithm? What's going on there, right? Like, I'm just curious your take on what's the real story of AI versus the RSA story of AI?
I think there's two different real stories of AI, and I think that RSA is reflective of one and anticipatory of the other. Okay. Right. So one story is, how are companies going to use AI to be more efficient, get more done with either fewer or the same resources? Like, that's basically, I forget which company it was that came out 2 weeks ago. My mind is in the RSA fog, and said, like, hey, if you want to hire anybody, you have to provide a justification for why you can't do that job with AI. Like, I think that's going to be a norm. And I am seeing more and more of that. And so I think a lot of when people say we're AI enabled, what they're really saying is not, hey, you should use us because we have AI. They're saying we have a more efficient cost structure. Like, because we are using AI, we're getting more done with the same number of people. And maybe it's better, who knows? And we'll pass that on to you, because now, like, if we're the AI enabled SOC, we'll still have analysts in your SOC, but your analysts will all be supported by AI that's going to scale. Because one of the things that did come up at B-Sides, I was at a different talk, and someone said, I really wish people would share their prompts. That you spend like 30 minutes crafting a great prompt. Like, anybody who thinks you can go over to ChatGPT and write a sentence and get a useful output, you're not really getting something great. Like, it takes 30 minutes to craft these amazing prompts that will do great things. Nobody shares it because that's your IP. Well, if you've got vendors who are doing that for you, now that they might not tell you what the prompt is, but you get the benefit of that prompt. So you don't have to hire as many prompt engineers. So I think that's sort of a reflective of, hey, we're seeing people doing that, so we wanted that first. There's a second one, I think it's anticipatory, which is agentic going to be the approach of the future? And short level, for those people who are not like, oh my God, yet another buzzword, is basically the idea of, rather than having general purpose AIs, you have very specific purpose agents, basically, that will do very specific tasks. And I think we're early on the agentic strategy. The biggest failing I see, both at RSA and in the general world, is people think of AI agents as humans that are cheaper. And they're not. They're not human, and they're not cheaper.
So let me ask you this. So a lot of the vendors that talk about this kind of will say, I'm cheaper than you hiring someone and doing it.
Yep.
The question is, there's no real studies to prove that the ROI is actually there, outside of just thinking that because Chat GPT, that it's going to do the same thing. There's something about instincts, right?
There's a lot about instincts, but that's a really
facility is a great example.
That's a key point.
There's two slider bars, right? There's two slider bars for every business to consider. One is, am I going to do the same amount of stuff with less resources thrown at it? Or am I going to take advantage of this new tool and with the same amount of resources get more done? And everybody seems to be defaulting to the first mechanism. And the second one is really far more interesting, because I would much rather keep my existing, I'm going to make numbers up now, 10 guys in the SOC, and say, what's my mean time to close now that I've added an agentic SOC approach? is my mean time to resolve quicker, then I'm winning the game and I'm not letting anybody go. Right. So it's two toggles that I think people often forget, that second toggle.
Yeah. So the mental model I have, and it's not a great one, is you should think of humans like aircraft carriers and AIs like the drones that operate off of them. Like, you need the human to be in control of this fleet of drones. And the problem is people's mental model is more like, well, I have a fleet of ships and I can replace the human ship with the AI ship. I'm not a Navy person. So anybody who's Navy who wants to argue with me, I was in the Air Force, you're all just targets anyway. I'll just sort of get that out of the way.
Drones don't float. That's our new byline.
Drones don't float, right? So, but the problem is when people are looking. You do F-18s. Yes, I did see that one. Also not an Air Force plane. Sorry, that was a good one. The way that I think about it is you can't take your current organization and say, well, I could replace that person with an AI. Like, you're going to get some outcome. It might actually be in the short term good. But what you really be looking at is, what does my organization look like when I have AI agents integrated with my human? Where I'm getting, as James says, that human intuition when I'm looking at a thing, but I'm getting the scale of when the human says, I need to do X. Like, when we were setting this up, there was a whole bunch of like click-through stuff that all of us had to do to get this to stream. And like, that's a great agentic approach, is just be able, and it's way better now than it was 10 years ago, just to be very clear. But, hopefully people love the content we bring that an agent's not going to replace. But how do you make that scale more?
I would push at the fact that you're right about the prompts, like this prompt library that someone should give, because that human instinct and then the ability for AI and LLMs to go through larger data sets than a human to find specific gut feelings by a good SOC engineer, by a good SOC analyst, is priceless, right? So can I find, instead of going network, could AI really kind of go through my entire network quickly through an effective prompt to find all the places that my instinct tells me something is happening?
Yeah. And I've talked to a bunch of companies. I haven't seen anybody really on the show floor yet, early stage, founders still ideating, that have had approaches like that I think are really fascinating. And I like to think of them as the architect's encyclopedia, right? When I was at Akamai, we would develop architects. We had what we called the Architect Studio, run by a fantastic manager who could take people out of college, like software engineers with no experience, and in 3 years, they were a complex systems architect who could design and build safe, large systems. And a key piece of their development was they had to build an encyclopedia of every system we had. And what was fascinating is at the end of it, the encyclopedia was not usable to anybody but them, because you had to have so much content in it, and they would each like make their own choices for how to document, but it was the act of writing it down that made it really valuable for them. And what I'm seeing is startups that are basically saying, well, what we can do is, if you have that smart person, we can basically tailor the encyclopedia to them. We'll have the AI go learn everything about your environment. And now when an alert comes up that the human knows nothing about the environment, the AI can basically say, hey, here's sort of what you should know about that environment. And in a sense, what it's doing, if this pans out, is saying, well, instead of you having this architect that the CISO can call to say, hey, I just heard about system X being broken, please brief me, you have an AI that can do that and brief you. Like, if this pans out, I think that's a force multiplier where it turns every one of your humans into somebody who can apply human intuition without necessarily having a model of how the whole system works, because they get it just in time, summarized for them by an AI that hopefully knows how they think.
Yeah.
So if we step away from AI, is there anything outside of AI on the floor or during the show that stood out? Beyond the AI,
a lot of people, identity, really big. People still don't have a good approach for identity, so it leaves a space. The number of practitioners I had who would talk about identity and then say, well, but does so-and-so do it? Naming one of the like 3 big identity vendors, and the other person would be like, nope. Right. So there's a lot of space here. I actually think the root cause of the identity problem is that identity is not tied to a human and to a business function. That I think there's a space for like the Bobs and the Workday to come in and be the root of trust for an identity solution. To say, hey, we know what your company does. We know who your employees are. Like, we can actually tie identity back to a job function rather than just to a principle.
So do you see, and now I'm going to ask your venture hat, and Allan, feel free to answer the question, but do you see consolidation in identity over potentially the next 12 months, where maybe next year we'll see larger identity players with a more like kind of NHI and human and kind of controls type of?
Yeah, so I think that the NHI space is still relatively new. So I don't think that one's going to consolidate much. I don't think we're going to see big acquisitions that will move the needle there for a while. We're going to need the NHI players to really prove that they've got something. And I don't know that they're going to roll into the human identity space, which is where we would actually love to see that in the long run. I think in the human identity side, we're going to continue to see this sort of rolling acquisitions as the big players keep doing strategic takeouts of competitors with neat products to sort of bring it under their umbrella. I don't know that those will be transformative. And so I think there will continue to be room to invest there. So that's how I'm thinking about the identity space right now.
Yeah, and I'm thinking some of these new startups that are coming out in the identity space are actually very fascinating to me. I think there's some interesting stuff going on, because I would argue that the biggest problem, and you already referenced the fact that we always think of human identity and forget about machine identities. Okay, let's even say we lump them together. All machine and human identities, all identities. We suffer from sprawl. We suffer from a model we call RBAC that tells us that we can control at this granular level all these little details and nuances, and within X days, months, years of an ecosystem, you've lost control. You're trying to RBAC your way through 40,000 layers of sedimentary deposits, right? And it strikes me that sprawl is the issue. Sprawl is the biggest issue. And having an agent of some kind that can navigate that sprawl, hunt the wumpus, run the vectors both directions. I am a resource. Who can see me? I'm an identity. What can I see? And constantly be scanning and monitoring and running those two perspectives and reporting it in a nice, AI-driven dashboard. It feels to me like there's a lot of win there. I think that's a good use.
There's someone already with something very similar to that.
Yeah, there's a couple startups in that space.
Yeah, there's a few of them now that are kind of heading down this path, and I think it's a valuable path, and I think it's an intersection of AI and identity that is overdue, and I want to see it come to fruition, and I want to see somebody really, really hit strides with it this year. I want to see this come out big.
I don't think the problem is RBAC, Allan. I think the problem is elsewhere, but I understand why RBAC is easy to pick on. It's because people don't want to do the actual complexities of RBAC, which is no human has one role. They have like 30 roles.
Right.
And so RBAC is just, it should just be treated as an abstraction layer, and it's not. And that's, I think,
and it should be a 4-dimensional model, really.
Yes.
Well, I just think identity
is important.
Identity. It doesn't matter what it is or where it is or who owns it, right?
Well, but time-bound access and time-bound identities is a real thing. That's what I'm saying about fourth dimension, right?
Right. But at the end of the day, identity needs one central hub of management, and it can't be just distributed across so many different, like the model of how we treat identities broken, even from a practitioner. Like, let's not even look at the vendor perspective. At the practitioner level, I think part of us on the enterprise side do identity wrong.
Well, here's my question for everybody, which is, in your organization, if you have an employee who changes their name and thus their username, how much hassle do they have to go through to get back all of their permissions? And if the answer is anything, then you have a broken identity ecosystem, because you were tying to the principle that was their name, not to the identity that was the human. This is a real problem. I used to have to champion somebody who, she got a divorce, and she did not, a divorce because she was being abused by her husband, and the IT team was like, we can't change your username. And she's like, are you effing kidding me? I have to carry his name around? She was going to quit. So I had to go in, and it's it ended up being 3 months of restoring every permission she had. That's how bad identity systems are in good companies.
And no doubt that same exercise found things that, she really shouldn't have access to this, that, and the other. As they're going through and doing the restore, they found excessive permissions. I can guarantee they found excessive permissions, because that's
absolutely. Well, here's my take on permissions, which is, and I had this in my Zero Trust talk, one of the places we went wrong is we continue to tie authorization to have a permission to the actual grant of the permission.
Right.
And it should be that it's hard to get authorizations, but easy to get grants. We should be able to go in and say, yep, this person is a systems administrator who needs root access on everything, so I authorize them to have root access everywhere, but you deliver it just in time in a seamless, frictionless fashion when they need it. like, and then it goes away. And the reason why this is important is that's the only way to get rid of permissions. Because you should go to somebody who has a permission they used to use, they don't use anymore, and say, hey, we just want to remove the grant. We're not going to remove the authorization to have this permission. If it turns out we were wrong, you need it back, instantly you can have it back. But right now, if you go to a team and say, hey, we're going to take away your permissions, they're all like, heck no. I haven't used that in a year, but I might get called tomorrow to have it. And I don't want to go through a 6-week process to get it.
Yep. And to your earlier point about the changing the name, right? There's some very simple tricks you can do for this that have nothing to do with AI or fancy technology whatsoever. You take your Workday, use it as your single source of truth. Take the employee ID, feed that to the core identity. That's the thing that's immutable. Names change to protect the innocent and the guilty, and the employee ID stays the same. They leave the company, even your leaver scenarios, you just reassign them the same ID when they return, and everything's gloriously turned back on. Or if not, you don't want it to be, you can still control it that way too. It's not rocket science to solve these.
It's not, but let's be fair. All of your downstream systems want to key off of username or email address. Like, that's the real problem.
And that's why you can set up that ID, right? Like I'm, whatever, I'm going to make up a number now. I'm 78579 at, company.com.
Well, AT&T does their email addresses that way. If you've ever worked with anyone at AT&T, it's typically their initials and a random 4-digit or 5-digit number after their initials.
Yeah, but you can still layer a human on top. You can emails are just aliases. You can have it be as human as you want on the front end. But the back end single source of truth, make that the numeric identity. Solve the problem.
It could if we weren't building federated environments. I think that sort of is the core problem.
It becomes an issue.
Identity is always fascinating because for years we focused on endpoint. Then we clearly realized that identity is the problem, not endpoint's the problem, because of great solutions that are in the market today around endpoint. And now that we're in the identity path, the identity field is so disjointed from MFA and kind of just-in-time authorization and authentication and user behavior analytics and now agentic AI around identity. But the real problem is the fact is we've built a infrastructure that's not on any sort of stable foundation for identity. I mean, we can't even agree on the name for Active Directory with Microsoft anymore. They call it Entra ID. Everyone calls it Active Directory. Right. No one knows what it is anymore. Right.
I think of the endpoint. Picture a bank robbery, right? Let's walk through a bank robbery and use cybersecurity terms. You've got an agent of some kind, an identity of some kind. In this case, it's a bad guy in a mask who's got access to the resource, the data, which in this case is the money, right? So we now have the intersection of identity and data, and he hops in the getaway car and he takes off down the street. And the cops say to themselves, stop that car. No, you don't want to stop the car. That's the endpoint. The endpoint is nothing more than a vehicle that allowed a certain intersection of identity and data to occur that should not have occurred. You don't want to stop the car. You want to stop the bank robber.
Right.
And or prevent it from being able to get in the first place by verifying identity more effectively and more thoroughly. Right?
Well, no one with a mask should be able to walk into a bank.
Yeah.
Well, there's that. But
there's that too. But what I like about Allan's metaphor is it ties into one of my pet peeves. Like my pet peeve is we try to then protect all the cars, right? And this is the whole endpoint security problem is we think the endpoint is the problem. No, the software that we put on the endpoint is the problem. Like we basically say that car doesn't belong to an end user. It belongs to the company. So it doesn't get to stay in their house. We're going to install 75 apps on it that are all remotely accessible. And 9 times out of 10, when the bank robber steals the car, he did it because it was part of our fleet. He didn't compromise the end user. Like if we could make those cars safer and store them in our employees' garages, maybe that's not how the bank robber gets into the bank. And now I'm straining the analogy because I'm thinking about driving the car to the bank.
But the point is well made. And SAFE, by the way, just said focus on least privilege. This is part of this phenomenon too, right? This is intersection of identity and data. This is precisely
I'll say I agree, but I hate the term least privilege. Least privilege is a confrontational phrase. If you say least privilege to somebody in the business, what they hear is, I'm going to take away your ability to do your job.
Right. I don't want you to have access, and I'm in charge.
It's kind of like zero trust was bad marketing.
Right. Bad marketing means because zero trust didn't say, look, if we said zero trust, don't trust your administrators, our employees would have been behind it. Instead, we said zero trust, don't trust your employees. Why did our employees not like this? Gee, I wonder. So I like to say minimize unused privilege. And so that is, look, we're just going to get your grants to the level you need them and give you just-in-time delivery that should be seamless. And look, if you come in and you ask for a thing that's not risky, we should just like grant it to you and then go back and figure out if you should have had it. And if not, you'll get like a minor slap on the wrist of, hey, you asked for something you weren't supposed to have, but it wasn't critical.
And the conversation just came full circle because what you just said was reduce attack surface.
Right.
Well, I mean,
reduce the attack surface of your identity.
Allan, you got to know your identity attack surface. And I guarantee you, if we sat in a room with a bunch of CISO and asked them, do you know your entire identity attack surface? And are you 100% sure? No arms would come up. I don't think even at 90 or 80, maybe at 70 would see a few arms.
And this is why this agentic and or LLM approach, I mean, it doesn't even have to be agentic. Right. There's a lot of ways to slice and dice LLM tackling this challenge, but that's why I'm saying I want these startups to come out this year and do some really cool stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that what's going to happen is
Peter says
they're not going to solve the problem, but they'll make it faster. Trim the access fat. I love that.
I love it. I love it.
Oh man, now it makes me want to go make a pastrami.
So I want to point out that my sheepadoodle broke down the baby gate and is now in the studio with me, and he's not supposed to be in here. And I now have a sheepadoodle live on the internet.
So Peter's got a good question here for you, Andy. What's absent this year versus last year? Who didn't come back?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't think I went and looked and tried to figure out who wasn't there. It's sort of like the paternity test, like finding the absence of somebody. No, nothing jumped out at me as not here. But now I'm going to go looking. Dang it, that's a hard question. So
we expect
ask it on LinkedIn and see.
Yeah, we'll ask it on LinkedIn, and then we'll definitely want people to let us know on howtociso.com. What's missing, right?
I'm going to register. I'm going to register how to properly CISO.com.
How to properly mess with Andy. Feel free. Yeah, anybody who goes to howtociso.com, it is not complete. If you're like, hey, I would love a guidebook on X, come find me. Like I'm here on Twitter. I'm on X. Like I'm easy to find.
Yeah. And Andy's very, 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 very approachable. That is one thing I will say about Mr. Ellis that is rare about many other people in our industry sometimes. Peter's asking around the GRC space. Have you seen anything around the GRC space?
A lot of folks in the GRC space. I thought that too, Peter, that Vanta Andrada had murdered it. There's a lot of startups in the GRC space. We'll see. I do suspect that it's a red ocean at this point with, two big orcas sitting in the middle of it, eating everybody up. Got your apex predators there. So we'll see what happens. But no, I saw more GRC companies than I thought I would.
That's amazing. So you look at RSA maybe this year towards years past. Is there anything maybe in the size of the event, the amount of people there that difference? I mean, are we back to pre-COVID type of crowds and companies, or is it still kind of pre-COVID?
It's pretty big. Like we did our party last night. I think we had 700 registrants for it. And we actually are very selective on who we let in. And we still had 700 people, like 500 through the night who actually showed up. And it's not in a big venue. So it was for rotating people in and out. It's mostly VCs and founders, but those are numbers we haven't seen for a while. And when I'm walking around, I see a lot of people.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I see a lot of people passing between buildings. Security got overwhelmed a couple of times in the buildings where there were lines to get into Moscone, which I've never really seen before.
Wow.
All right, so it's good to know that the security community is alive and well, and that we're back to kind of that pre-COVID type of numbers in San Francisco. Are you able to tell the difference between maybe out-of-towners to in-towners? Specifically at RSA, because that always to me was fascinating. How many are the guys getting away from some of the Silicon Valley security space coming to Moscone for the gadget versus
I can't really tell. I mean, I was doing the book signing on the show floor, and I'll tell you the people who walked by, because I check their badges because I always want to see if I can make some pun when I'm autographing the book. A lot of them did feel like they were out of towners. So it didn't feel like this was, oh no, this is just the local community that's here.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Every year I'm one of at most 3 cowboy hats though. So there's not too many Texans, apparently.
Don't think I've seen very many cowboy hats around. And it is a little chilly. This is a chilly year, and I think they've just announced, or it's leaked, that it's going to be in March next year. If I might be wrong on that one, because I've got that date secondhand. I think like March 20 something.
Well,
so even chillier.
But it's. I mean, I like it. I like RSA earlier in the year because it allows you to budget for it a little bit better than when it is right now. Because I mean, it's April 30th. We're 3 months from Black Hat, right?
Yeah,
so it you need some time in separation. I will say one thing about YL parties here. I was at the YL party in Israel during Cyber Week, during Cyber Tech, and that was
that's a good one.
Party. Yeah, that was a fantastic event.
Our event planner, she is amazing and does some fantastic work.
Indeed. So looking at kind of, if we go beyond the floor, if we go kind of beyond that, did you attend any other talks there? Did anything stand out? I've been reading some of the stuff coming out about, Kristi Noem's keynote address and we don't have a head of CISA. Is there any kind of maybe hallway conversations around CISA's direction?
So there have been a couple conversations around CISA's direction from random CISOs. I think there's a lot of people who are sort of disappointed in the evolution of CISA, and I don't just mean the last 4 months. I actually mean the time before it. That it sort of people felt like it overreached, and that now what we're seeing is a pullback, maybe pendulum swing too far. But that definitely there's a lot of disappointment that it was heavily politicized, under its previous director, and that now it's sort of paying the price of that, for better or worse. Because a lot of people rely on CISA, not just for KEV, which is really useful, and for the support of the MITRE CVE program, but for other things as well. And so, we're hoping, I think a lot of CISOs are just they're cautiously optimistic, and also that the big value that CISA provides to most CISOs isn't that expensive. And so there's a belief that, maybe an industry consortium will take over some of that work.
Right. And there are more than one effort going on in the industry consortium aspects of that game. And I'm part of one of them. I'm part of one of them.
I think that's a good thing. I don't want to rely on government for all of this stuff, because I don't want CISA to be overachieving, over invasive or under invasive. Like that pendulum swing is just inconsistent we need stability. We need something in the middle.
Exactly.
We challenged ourselves with a set of questions before we came up with a mission statement. We challenged ourselves with a set of questions, and one of those was, what are the single points of failure? And this is not an exercise most of us have ever thought through before, but a government is in fact a single point of failure.
Yes.
So the idea of a distributed model, like a distributed ledger, I'm not going to go as far as to say blockchain, but a distributed ledger CVE database would be really interesting. And that's what I'm agitating for.
That'd be fascinating to see. I don't know what I'm agitating for, but that's just the sense of the CISOs I talked to around this.
Yep. Safe has another question about AI. If we want to return to that topic, it's about how do you deal when
given that AI's strength, its ability to learn can also be its vulnerability, how do you handle adversarial attacks where inputs are subtly manipulated to mislead the system?
I mean, this is the core risk of everybody using AI. And I think that if you're a CISO, this is where you most can provide value, is talking about how to use AI well. Every CMO I talk to, for instance, this is what I tell them. I say, you should be using AI in your SEO. Like if you're building your website to be SEO, which I honestly think isn't really valuable, but if you're going to do it, great. Use ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever your favorite LLM is, and then you hand it to a human. Do not let AIs make decisions for you. Do not let them bind your company. Let them write drafts and have humans who know that their job is to be an adversarial editor who does not believe the AI. And that's how you do it. Start from that approach. And now everywhere you add in AI, that's always going to be your approach, is think adversarially. One of the things I would recommend if you're an agentic company, especially in the SOC automation space who's listening, you should have 2 AIs instead of 1 for every place you want to have an agent, one of whom always thinks it's an adversary and one of whom always thinks it's legitimate. And make the human decide which one of them is correct. Rather than only present them with one view.
So are you suggesting red team through AI, blue team through AI, purple team through humans?
Yes, that's a great way to phrase it. Absolutely. For anything you're doing, somebody who's a downer, somebody who's an upper, and the human has to split between them.
Yeah, and that settles the source code. There's a lot of LLM QAing code and writing code now. That same model applies there. You have to have
Right.
two of these things fighting each other. You don't just crank out code from one AI and then just roll it to prod, right?
Yeah,
Well,
I always laugh at the
people do that, Alan. People
They
do that
do.
all day. It's terrifying.
Here's my question for anybody who's having AI write code. If AI writes code based on the body of knowledge that it has learned by reading code, exactly where is it learning how to write secure code?
It's not. All right. So
From the vast body of secure code the world has given us, Andy.
Exactly.
Don't be so cynical.
So let me ask you a question. If we're on AI, the EU AI Act is kind of starting to gain a lot of traction. And if you haven't seen the EU AI Act, it's really kind of what I call the GDPR of AI, right? But it specifically talks about they've used a similar to a CMMC model in terms of rating your AI system as being allowed, not allowed, all of that, and then kind of the certifications and stuff someone has to take. Have you seen anything on the floor around is there any talk around this, or is it too early?
No. I think it's a little bit too early. I think there are some folks who are thinking about it. My biggest worry is that, like GDPR, which shitified the web, I only use that because it's a term of art. Like, if you think GDPR helped the web out, how do you feel about the pop-up click-throughs you have to do on every website? That's straight up GDPR. Like, I worry about what's going to happen when we get EU approaches to making soft agents work better. But I didn't hear a lot of people arguing about it yet.
Yeah, I will say one thing for everyone who's in the AI space. One thing for sure is I've seen more as California, New York, Colorado, and Virginia all have AI laws that are getting on the books. Like, they've got bills written out and whatnot. There's going to be a whole lot more probably coming from Texas real soon, and Florida as well.
It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I expect next year RSA will have something around AI governance.
Yes.
Yeah. The automation of GRC will be an automation of AI governance. Guaranteed next year that's going to be a trend. Guaranteed.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think the laws are coming fast. Fast, and it's going to take some time to catch that. All right. So
meanwhile, I was just going to say real quick on the AI thing too. It's funny how we all talk about it as if it's a meta conversation, and the actualities of AI, how to use it well, how to learn it, what it's capable of, and do the doing. How many companies are driving initiatives for that? Because where I work, we happen to have this really killer AI academy, and you can get your white belt and your yellow belt, and we are teaching every single employee in the company, like, here's what it is. Here's what it can do. Here's what it ought not do. Here's what you can try to do. Here's the parameters and the limitations and the capabilities and some great ideas. Now go through this, get your belts, and start coming up with clever ways to enhance your own work experience with it, knowing that there's boundaries and secure things you have to do and keep in mind, et cetera, et cetera. Like, that fundamental education is lacking as we all chatter about the security of it. What about the employees trying to use it aren't educated on what it is and what it does? Like, there's still a huge education gap just on the basics of AI that we're already behind the curve on while we run around with our technical solutions. We've got humans that need help, and we're not giving them that help.
100%.
I can't wait for the next SaaS tool that's going to go look through Gen AI models and find all of your data and IP sitting in some model by some employee who put it out there. Shadow AI is real. It's out there. And
the next thing that does prompt harvesting, that just is like, oh, we'll grab out of your browser every prompt you've ever done.
Hey, Nick, thanks for being here. I know we've got a few more minutes, gents. So I kind of want to take this back to, will this conversation be happening in person next year, or will we be still remote?
I'll be here.
So I'm the only vote that's a maybe.
Oh, I'm a definite.
I don't know.
Well, if you're not going to be at RSA, James, we can do this again with you.
Yeah. I don't know. Until March of next year, a lot can happen.
This is actually my take, which is, I think that during RSA, there's a dearth of content for people who aren't at RSA. FOMO is a real thing.
FOMO is a real thing. I'll definitely be a Black Hat this year. Hopefully, chopping it up. But Andy, are you going to be at Cyber Week Tel Aviv in June?
I will not be, because fingers crossed I'll be in the middle of moving. So instead, I am going to Tel Aviv tomorrow.
Well, one, enjoy your flight to Tel Aviv tomorrow.
Thank you.
You're missing Independence Day, so
so is most of Tel Aviv. The fires are pretty bad, I hear. So prayers with all the first responders. I hope everybody stays safe.
Yeah, lots of fires happening right now there. So Cyber Week Tel Aviv, for those who haven't been, and Alan, I don't know if you've ever been to Cyber Week in Tel Aviv.
I've been invited. I haven't made it out yet.
It's one of the better events, I think, in the cyber industry, most underrated, because it's put on by Tel Aviv University. It's primarily research based and really practitioner based. It's not a vendor fair. It doesn't have the vendor fair feel that RSA, Black Hat, so many others. It's very similar to a CISO XC, only done by a university rather than practitioners.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you want, Alan, I can hook you up with my Tel Aviv team, and they would be very happy to help you with logistics on getting in and out and where to stay.
We can certainly look at it. I've got this year I'm doing the Team 8 CISO Summit, which I've never done before, which is going to be this year.
Yeah,
Alan, I've never done that one. I'm going to give it a whirl. I've heard really good things, that it's just a really good, it's supposed to be one of the best peering events that you can get as a CISO. I'll give that one a whirl. I'll be at Black Hat MEA again this year, but I probably won't be at Black Hat US, just because those two is already that's enough for me. And I missed RSA. That's 2 in 1 year. With the new job, I'm busy.
You can't keep a Texan out the desert. He heard me.
Right. You're not.
Like Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Is it dry? Is it a dry event?
Yeah. But there's lots of Saudi coffee. And if you are a coffee fiend like I am, Saudi coffee is intense.
As someone who spent a lot of time in that part of the world, I can tell you I agree with you. And Saudi coffee is intense, and it's a great place to be at overall. The Saudis definitely know how to put on a show.
Yeah, they do. And the interesting thing about Black Hat MEA versus Black Hat US or RSA is when you're walking the floor, you don't get accosted. There's this respect of the visitors and guests kind of mindset that the people working the booths have. You can stroll right next to their booth slowly, and you won't get accosted. If you don't,
even with a CISO on your badge.
What's that?
Even with a CISO on your badge. Mm-hmm. I'd love for you to do that, at a US event, walk around with a CISO on your badge and video it, with a GoPro on your chest, then do it at a MIA event and kind of see the difference.
So I will say I have found I can keep some of the accosting down at RSA by looking over the heads. Never make eye contact. Walk, if you're going to slowly look at the booth, and it helps that I'm 6'3", but I look over the heads of the booth staff, and I can see people who are want to engage, but because I won't make eye contact with them, it stops them for just long enough for me to get past their booth.
Well, the other thing too is when I was running the Cyber Ranch, I would always go under that umbrella, so I looked like a podcaster and not a CISO, and nobody wants to scan a journalist badge, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I will.
But I'll tell you, I got a lot of people who see I'm a venture capitalist, and they're like, "Oh, funding."
Right. Let me tell you about my new idea.
Yeah.
I have 3 great ideas. Which one do you want to put money on?
And the answer is maybe, but probably not with you.
Well, gents, this has been unbelievable for everyone watching that's been part of this journey with us here for the last 58 minutes. Thank you. Go check out howtociso.com. Put that right there.
And howtoproperlyciso.com is coming soon.
Alan will launch his, and then I'll say howtonotciso.com. And
great. When you guys get bored, just redirect them back to me. I'll give you a landing page.
Wait,
how to CISO, how to not CISO, and how to CISO properly.
TheAgenticCISO.com.
The Agentic CISO. Ooh, that actually could be kind of cool. I would love to see somebody do that.
I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
We'll incorporate the sheep.
I was reading a Slack writing of a company that said that they're creating a agentic AI CISO, and I said, I can't wait to see that CISO report to the board. That's going to be fantastic.
Answer a board member's question. Good luck with that.
Good luck with that. Yeah. All right, Andy.
First, you have to train the board on prompt engineering. It'll all work out. No problem.
It'll all work out. Andy, enjoy the rest of your time at RSA. Have a safe journey to Israel.
Thanks.
Be safe out there, man. Look forward to seeing more and more from you. Alan, feel better, buddy. It's great to have you here. It's been a while. See you at Teammate CISO Summit, man. I can't wait.
That'll be fun.
That's going to be a fun week, man. Absolutely. Sorry, Andy. I know Teammate, but I know you guys do a lot of stuff with Teammate. So
we do a lot of stuff. We don't hate Teammate. We're just friendly competition.
There's nothing wrong with friendly competition. In fact, we all need friendly competition. Your competitor isn't your enemy; it's your friend, realistically, and potentially your acquirer.
Could be.
Never know.
Right? You never know. All right, gents, and for everyone tuning in, thank you so much, gents. Andy, sign us
Peter.
off.
Thanks,
Allan.
safe.
Okay. Yeah. Stay safe, everybody.
Take care, y'all.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.